Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining this Sunday's discussion on Yaksha Prashna. Before I go into the story of Yaksha Prashna, I would like to make a few remarks on Mahabharata. It has 18 parvas, or 18 chapters, or 18 books, starting with Adi Parva and then ending up with Swargarohana Parva. And the entire text contains a number of interesting stories, and the stories themselves are interesting, but more importantly, each of those stories carries with it certain lessons, moral lessons, ethical lessons for us to follow. They're very more like Aesop's fables, very, very good stories. These are told by stalwarts like Bhishma, and so these are very important stories. More than the stories, what I like about the Mahabharata are the various dialogues. The dialogues are very important, and I've selected a few, maybe about a dozen, that I think are, I found them to be very interesting. Dialogue means samvada. The most famous dialogue, of course, all of you know, is Krishna-Arjuna Samvada, which is also called Bhagavad Gita. That's the most famous dialogue in Mahabharata. The second great dialogue is between Yudhisthira and Bhishma. When Bhishma was lying on a bed of arrows at the end of the war, Yudhisthira asks him, "Please tell me once again all about Dharma." And Yudhishthira and Bhishma gives an exhaustive description of Dharma. And that in that particular Anushasika Parva, in that particular Parva, you also get the famous Vishnu Sahasranama. Then there is Kunti and Karna dialogue, highly emotional dialogue, which talks about Kula Dharma, it talks about Kshatriya Dharma, it talks about Matu Dharma. Very interesting dialogue, very heart-wrenching. Then there is Krishna and Karna dialogue, which is also very interesting dialogue. Then Vidura, the wise person, has a couple of dialogues with Yudhishthira, where he talks about the moral and ethical life. He talks about number of important considerations in one's dharma. Then there is Yudhishthira and Nahusha. Nahusha is a serpent king, and he and Yudhishthira have a very interesting dialogue, where again, many aspects of dharma are brought into focus. Then there is Yudhishthira and Duryodhana dialogue, which is just before Duryodhana was slain by Bhima. Very interesting dialogue between Yudhishthira and Bhishma and Duryodhana. And you find lots of references to ethical behavior, moral behavior, what dharma means. Then there is Markandeya Yudhishthira dialogue, wherein Yudhishthira asks Markandeya, sage Markandeya, can you tell me, of course, this happened in Dwapara Yuga. So he asks Markandeya, what do you see in the future? What do you see in Kali Yuga? Markandeya gives a description of Kali Yuga, and if you read the description, it is almost impossible to believe how accurate he is in forecasting what people in Kali Yuga are going to be facing. Then there is Gandhari and Krishna. After the war is over, when they go into the battlefield to look at all the dead people, Gandhari and Krishna have a very spirited dialogue. Gandhari reminds Krishna about ethics and morality. And then there is Gandhari and Yudhishthira. That also is a very interesting dialogue that happens after the war. Another dialogue that I like is the Bhima Anjaneya. You may be surprised to know that Anjaneya appears in Dwapara Yuga. to meet Bhima, his brother. Both of them are children of Vayu, of course. And very interesting dialogue. And that is where you also see what is called the Ramayana. Anjaneya gave Hanumad Ramayana. He gives a sankshipt, a very brief description of Ramayana, which is very, very nice. So if you don't have time to read Valmiki's Ramayana, you can always read this Ramayana given by Hanuman himself, Hanumad Ramayana. Another interesting dialogue is between a Brahmin, Kaushika, and a housewife, where housewife teaches the Brahmin, arrogant Brahmin, what Swadharma is, or what Brahmana Dharma is all about. And then at her suggestion, Kaushika meets a butcher, Vyadha, and Vyadha teaches him all about Swadharma and Paradharma. So you see, number of important things about dharma are discussed in these dialogues. And the other interesting thing in Mahabharata is the various players. I'll just concentrate on the women in Mahabharata. You have, of course, Madri, you have Kunti, you have Draupadi, and you have Gandhari. Madri has very little appearance in the entire epic, very little. Gandhari appears early in the dialogue, early in the book, when her advice to Duryodhana, and he also appears later in the book after the war, her dialogue with both Krishna and Yudhisthira. Kunti, of course, makes an appearance all through the epic, as well as Draupadi. Krishna, Yudhisthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Duryodhana, they're all portrayed all through the epic. Nakula and Sahadeva, they don't get very much exposure in the entire epic, but wherever they appear, they seem to be portrayed in a very positive way. It's also very informative to trace the evolution of the major characters throughout the Mahabharata. For example, I took Kunti as an example and then charted her appearance going through each chapter and then marking down wherever Kunti is mentioned. And then she goes from Adi Parva, Sabha Parva, Vana Parva, Virata Parva, Udyoga Parva, Sauptika Parva, and Mahaprasthanika Parva, all the way. And it's very interesting to see how the character of Kunti and how the character of Draupadi develop throughout the epic. You know, the one wants, I was curious to see as the war went on, after having seen all the atrocities that were committed, whether their attitude towards dharma had changed or stayed steady. And you also find that dialogues, that evolution of the characters very interesting. And one of the three things that you take away from reading Mahabharata and thinking about it, one of them, transgression of dharma results in deep karma. The debt of karma follows an unrighteous one. That is shown over and over again. One who slips from yoga falls into roga. An undisciplined life leads to the disease of body, mind, and intellect. And the third lesson you find is the result of asha is pasha. Asha means desire or greed. Pasha is a noose around one's neck. The rope of desire puts a noose around one's neck. You find evidence for all of those things over and over again throughout the Mahabharata. So this is the brief introduction to the epic. And what I would like to do today is to talk about the dialogue between Yaksha and Yudhisthira. Yaksha means different people call Yaksha different things. Yaksha is called a spirit, it's called a celestial being, he's called a wizard, but whatever it is, that Yaksha is a celestial being. you actually come across Yaksha again in Kenopanishad, when Professor Rambachan continues on with his discourse on Kenopanishad. In chapter 3, in words number 2 and 3, Brahma appears as an Yaksha before Indra, Vayu, and Agni to test them. So Yaksha is a spirit that is portrayed by the gods. So the Pandavas were very happy settling down in Dvaitavana during their 12th year of Vanavasa. If you remember, they lost the bet. So they had to spend 12 years in the forest and 1 year Agnatavasa, or 1 year incognito. And during the time of Agnatavasa, if their identity were to be revealed, then they had to go through 12 more years of Vanavasa and 1 more year of Agnatavasa. And so they were very close to completing the 12 years. They were only a few weeks away from completing the 12 years. And the particular place where they were settled is called Dvaitavana, and very beautiful place, lot of greenery, fruit trees, and flowering shrubs. One day when they were sitting down, a Brahmin comes rushing to them in great state of agitation. Help me, help me, help me, he says. And Dharmaraja looks at him, Yudhisthira looks at him and says, how can we help you? He says, I was preparing myself to perform a special yajna. So I was going to go to the river to take a bath before I lit up the yajna fire. So I had my churning rod and the rope that goes along with it. The churning rod is the one that you sort of churn back and forth on a hard rock, and then the friction produces heat, so you can put dry grass and small twigs and they catch fire. Once they catch fire, then you can build a big fire for your yajna. And so I had suspended them on a low branch of a tree. Suddenly I saw a huge deer with big antlers came running, dashing through, and then it went through the tree, and then it picked up in its antlers my churning rod and the rope that is used to churn the rod. So please retrieve them for me, because without them, I cannot perform the yajna. Yudhisthira said, okay, I will take you, go and find out where the deer is. And he pointed out the direction in which the deer went. So all the Pandavas, Yudhisthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nicholas, for a long time, they spotted. After they spotted the deer, Arjuna fires an arrow which misses the deer, and then the deer disappears. After a little while, the deer appears again. So the Pandavas follow the deer. So the deer appears, disappears, appears, disappears, dragging the Pandavas deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest. And then they could not catch the deer. They were very tired because they had been trekking the deer for a long time, and they were very, very thirsty. So Yudhishthira spots a big tree, a tall tree, and they sit underneath the tree to take some rest, and said, we should take some rest and find some water so that we can quench our thirst. Before we do that, so they were sitting down, and then they could not understand why they were not able to capture the deer. Nakula was very sorrowful. With a sorrowful eye, he says, "Oh, brothers, we have never violated Dharma, nor have our ancestors. We have never gone after wealth, driven by the force of greed. We have led a righteous life. We have not engaged in mean-spirited talk or conversations. We have always done our duty at the right time and have been generous in helping the needy. Given all this, I feel sad that we are not able to catch the deer. And why did this happen to us? I cannot understand. Dharmaraja, Yudhisthira responds, Nakula, we cannot predict when difficulties arise. They can come at any time and at any place. Only Yamadharmaraja is the dispenser of these, and these are dictated by our merits and demerits, papa and punya. He dispenses the fruits of the appropriate at the appropriate time and the appropriate place. Then Bhima chimes in. He says, Oh, brother, I know why we are in this situation. Do you remember when Dushasana was shaming Draupadi in the Sabha? He was pulling at her sari. He was violating Dharma. And I was sitting there watching him violate Dharma. I did not protect Dharma. That's the reason why we are having this difficulty. Arjuna said, I agree with Bhima. What he said is true. Remember, in that Sabha, I heard the cruel words spoken by Dushasana and also by Karna, and then they were humiliating to Draupadi. I did nothing. I just sat there. And that's the reason why we are having this particular problem. A Kshatriya's duty is to protect women who are in trouble. And this woman was in great trouble. I did not protect her. And that's the reason why we are having this difficulty. Then Sahadeva says, no, you're all wrong. Remember the dice game where Shakuni was cheating? I saw with my own eyes what Shakuni was doing. And I know the scriptures say if you see somebody who is cheating, it is your duty to catch the cheater and teach him a lesson, whatever the appropriate lesson might be. I failed to do that. That's the reason why we are in this terrible mess. Yudhisthira then consoled his brothers and advised them, put your mind at rest. Don't speculate on things, but concentrate on catching the deer. That's our primary duty right now, and that's what you should focus on. And then he tells Nakula, Madreya means son of Madri. You see the tree, it's a tall tree. Why don't you climb the tree and look around in all directions? Infer if there is any water nearby. You can do so by spotting certain trees that grow near water. And if you spot the tree, listen very, very carefully, you may be able to hear the chirping of birds. And if you are very, very alert, you might even be able to smell the beautiful fragrance of flowers when the gentle wind is blowing. So Nakula then climbs up the tree, and then he follows Yudhishthira's advice, and then he definitely spots certain species of trees that would grow near a lake. He also hears faintly the chirping of birds, and he also gets a whiff of the fragrance of the flowers. So Nakula then comes down and tells him, this is the direction where we might find water. Then Yudhishthira says, okay, Nakula, thank you. Why don't you go and fetch some, drink water for yourself, refresh yourself, and bring back some water so that we can also quench our thirst. So Nakula then makes his way slowly in the dense jungle, and then he approaches a lake, beautiful lake, filled with clear water, and he sees birds sipping water and lush growth of beautiful flowers around the lake. And he immediately wants to go and refresh himself. And so as he's about to dip into the lake with his palms to take water from the lake to drink, he hears a roaring voice coming from above. It says, Ma tata, sahasam karshi, mama purva parigraha, prashnatitvatam arte madreya, pibasvacha, harasvacha. So this was a Yaksha's voice from above. It says, "Oh child, don't try to be a hero and touch this water. This lake has belonged to me for a long time. Before you take a sip of this water, you must answer my questions. Afterwards, you may drink as much as you want to, and you can also carry to other people. Now, Nakula looks around and he cannot see anybody. Then he looks up, he looks down, he looks in the front, in the back, on the sides, and then he says, I'm so fatigued and I'm so thirsty. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me. I may be hallucinating the whole thing. I see nothing here, nobody, no animals, no people, but this voice is coming and telling me not to drink this water. I must be dreaming. Anyway, let me go and drink the water. So he ignored the voice that came from above and drank the water. Soon after, he falls dead on the banks. Yudhisthira got a little bit anxious because Nakula had not arrived, and therefore he asked Sahadeva, will you please go and see what happened to your brother? So Sahadeva follows the same path, the same direction as Nakula did. He also comes to the lake. He sees Nakula lying down as though he is fallen asleep. And Sahadeva says, yeah, he probably drank water. He was so tired, so he's kind of taking a nap. So let me also drink the water, and then I'll wake him up. Just before he dipped his hands into the lake, he hears exactly the same voice from above. Oh, child, don't try to be a hero. Do not touch this water. This lake belongs to me, and you must answer my questions first before you're allowed to drink water and bring water to whoever it is that you're going to bring water to. Sahadeva also thought he was hearing things, ignored the warning given by Yaksha. He takes a sip of the water. He also falls down dead right next to Nakula. Then it was Arjuna's turn to go look for his brothers. After Yudhishthira said, Arjuna, go and see what happened to your brothers. They haven't seen them come back. They should have been back here a long time ago. So Arjuna goes there, and he sees his two brothers fallen along the lake shore. They looked as though they were in deep sleep. He then strung his bow and looked carefully in all directions to see if there may be any animal or any person hiding there. He could not see any people. He could not see any animals. Arjuna also decided, let me drink water, refresh myself, and then I will investigate further. He too heard Yaksha's voice. Yakshi, have you come to drink this water? You cannot drink this water without answering my questions. Your valor will not help you in ignoring my words. He gives him a warning. Arjuna was furious at his words. Not being able to see Yaksha, he showered arrows in all directions. Then Yaksha, with a derisive laughter, says, why are you wasting your arrows? Your actions is like fighting air with your fist. You will gain nothing from this. Answer my questions first. If you don't and try to drink the water, you shall also die. Then Arjuna was very furious, and he says, do you know who I am? I am Dhananjaya, great archer. People tell me my archery is as good as Indra's archery. And who are you to stop me? So he also ignores his warning, takes a sip of the water, and falls down dead. The same fate awaited Bhima, who also went looking for them. He also ignored Yaksha's voice, and he also falls dead. Yudhishthira then finally goes looking out for his brothers. And then he comes to the lake, and he sees lots of animals and birds along the way. He then approached the lake and saw his brothers laying on the ground. And then he laments. Bhima had vowed to tear Duryodhana's thighs, and now he cannot keep his vow. He cannot keep his word. When Arjuna was born, the Devatas had said that none could defeat Arjuna, for his valor would be equal to that of Indra himself. My words may be dishonored, but the Devata's words have been dishonored. Arjuna is dead now. Devata's words cannot be dishonored. I don't understand why. So there must be a Maya acting here. I must find out what this Maya is. He laments further and sits down under a tree, totally confused. He slowly regains his composure and thought loudly thus: I see no marks on these bodies. I see no footprints around them. I see no evidence of struggle. Whoever that killed my brothers must be a Mahabhuta. I will resolve this mystery. Maybe Duryodhana is playing tricks. Maybe he poisoned this well with this water. Ah, not true. I don't see in my brothers' faces distorted by poison. They look like they're fast asleep. Let me take a sip of water, quench my thirst, and then resolve this mystery once and for all. He then heard the same voice from the Yaksha. Do not drink this water before answering my questions. And Yaksha also said, I am a bird who feeds on the fish on this lake. Your brothers ignored my warnings, and hence they are dead. You too shall die if you don't answer my questions before drinking this water. Dharmaraja, Yudhisthira, looks around and says, my brothers are brave warriors. A mere bird could not have caused their death. You must be a very powerful being. I want to know who you are. I'm very anxious. At the same time, I'm a little bit afraid also. So please tell me who you are. The Yaksha responds, O Dharmaraja, salutations to you. I am indeed not a bird, but Yaksha. Yakshoham asmi. I am Yaksha. Your brave brothers met their fate by me only. Then the Yaksha reveals himself. He was a gigantic figure. His eyes were red, flaming red. Oh, his thighs were as big as the trunk of the tree. He was splendid to look at the same time, very afraid, very powerful figure. And he also had a very powerful voice. Then Yaksha said, Dharmaja, I did not kill your brothers without reason. I warned them, fair and square, about drinking this water without first answering my questions. They chose to ignore my warnings and they met their fate. So don't blame me for that. Will you now answer my questions or ignore me and meet the same fate? Yudhisthira said, O Yaksha, I will not drink this water without your permission. It is against dharma to partake of anything that belongs to others without seeking. We call it asteya. So I need to have your permission. I cannot truthfully say that I have the ability to answer your questions because I don't know what those questions are, and I am not sure I'm able to answer your questions to your satisfaction. The only thing that I can promise you is I will do my very best. That's all I can say. Please proceed with your questions. And you see the modesty of Dharmaraja here. He recognizes the dharma of not taking anything that belongs to others without seeking their permission first. And so Yudhishthira displays here his understanding of dharma. And Yaksha then says, we will start the question for you. You can answer. Now, please remember, I will not have a one-to-one correspondence between Yaksha's questions and Yudhishthira's answers. Sometimes it's easy to do, sometimes it is very difficult to do, draw one-to-one correspondence between a part of the question and part of the answer. So the best I can do is to summarize, from my point of view, what Yaksha was trying to ask, and then summarize what Yudhisthira was responding to Yaksha's question. So if you give me that permission, then it's much easier to go through the questions and answers. So here comes, there are more than 100 questions and 100 answers. I will not go through all the 100 questions. I'll probably select a few, maybe 15 or 20 that are important because they display certain interesting things for us to think about. So instead, and also I've tried very hard to find a pattern in these questions. In other words, I wanted to segregate them into groups. So this group of questions addresses this issue, this group of questions addresses this issue, etc. And I've not been able to do so, at least to my satisfaction. So I will forego that exercise and simply go through the questions and answers. So Yaksha, first question to Dharmaraja is this: what makes the sun rise? Who goes around the sun? Who causes the sunset? Where is he established? That's Yaksha's first question. Remember, I don't think Yaksha was questioning Yudhisthira in astronomy. Yaksha was asking, what makes the sun rise? Who goes around the sun? Who causes the sun to set? Where is he established? I don't think that Yaksha was questioning Yudhisthira in astronomy. We now know that the sun never rises or sets in the usual understanding of the word. Rather, the earth spins every 24 hours as it orbits around the sun. When the part of the earth is facing the sun, we say the sun has risen. When the part moves away from the sun, we say the sun has set. In reality, the sun has never risen, sun has never set, it has always been there. The planets go around the sun, like the Earth, the Moon, the Venus, the Mars, etc. In reality, the sun has always been there, shining. So Yaksha's question cannot be an astronomy. It must be much deeper. And if you think about it, you come to understand what Yaksha's question was about. I think he's talking about awareness or Atman. He's talking about Atma Jnana, awareness. Sun is called Aditya, and it can be likened to the Atman. The light of the Atman, or Atma Jyoti, is also referred to as the sun. Brahma, meaning knowledge, makes the Atman known. Sunrise. Who makes the sun rise? Brahma gives it the knowledge. Through knowledge, one intuits the real nature of Atman as Satchidananda. The Atman is always shining, Swayam Prakasha, as Professor Rambachan said, Swayam Prakasha, self-effulgent. It appears not due to our ignorance, Prakriti Dharma. Atman is always establishing truth. We say that a thing is true if it cannot be negated in all periods of time. As Professor Rambachan has correctly pointed out, this awareness is in the waking state, it is in the sleeping state, it is in the dream state, it is in the deep sleep state. It is not negated in time. And Atman is all pervasive, as you pointed out, and it is established in truth. Another way to interpret Yaksha's question is this. If you interpret Aditya as the Jiva, Jivatma is the bound soul, the first question becomes, who raises this bound soul from its earthly connections? The answer is Brahman, or knowledge. Who keeps company with the soul during its purification? The answer is qualities such as Shama, Dhamma, Titiksha, Uparati, Shraddha, Samadhana, of course, accompanied with Viveka and Vairagya. And these are the ones, they are all divine in nature, and they keep company of the individual who is seeking purification of the mind. Who leads the soul to the state of rest? It is dharma, meaning a life of morality. One must pass through all the karmas before attaining to a state of rest, truth, or knowledge. This is what is called Citta Prajna. Atmaneva Atmana Tushtaha. Come to that particular level, we have to have a clear mind. We have to have a mind that is free of conflicts. Only when the mind is prepared and is free of conflicts can it receive the knowledge given by the guru or the teacher. And to gain that purity of the mind, the Shastras recommend these exercises, Shama, Dhamma, Titiksha, Uparati, Shraddha, Samadhana, followed by meditation, must practice over and over and over again so that the mind is clear, free of conflicts. It can receive the knowledge given by the teacher, and then it intuits the relevance of the equivalence between Jivatma and the Paramatma. And in whom is the soul established? It is truth or knowledge. A gnani always stays unmoved in true knowledge. He is Sthita Prajna. So this is the essence of his first question. So it's not a question on astronomy. It's really, if you think about it, if you equate sun to the Atman, and if you equate all the planets that go around the sun, accompany the sun as the Shat Sampat that accompany the aspirant, the student who wants to learn all about the equivalent between Jivatma and Paramatma. And so if you interpret it that way, I think the question of Yaksha makes sense, and Yudhisthira's answers also make sense. Yudhisthira, I think, gives a fairly complete answer to Yaksha's question. He must have, because Yaksha is very pleased of Yudhisthira's answers, and then he goes around and asks the second question. He says, what makes one well-versed in knowledge? What makes him great? By what means does one assume a second form? What makes one wise? So this is Yaksha's second question. And Yudhisthira responds. I'm trying to find where it is. Kena svit shrotriyo bhavati. What makes one well-versed in knowledge? Kena svit vindate mahat. What makes him great? Kena svit dvitiyavan bhavati. By what means does one assume a second form? Raja kenacha buddhiman. What makes one wise? That is Yaksha's question. And Yudhishthira answers, one becomes great or knowledgeable by studying the Vedas. Tapas makes him great. Steadiness and firmness cause one to assume a second form. One becomes wise by serving the elders and the teachers. Shrutena shrotriyo bhavati. Tapasa vindate mahat, he says. Buddhiman bhavati vriddha sevaya. Serving the elders, one becomes wise. Let's analyze the question and the answer. Yaksha assumed that mere study of the Vedas does not make one knowledgeable. Yudhishthira replies that Vedas should be studied under the guidance of a qualified teacher. By Shrutena, he means Acharya Mukhat Vedartha Avadharanena. Only by studying under the guidance of a teacher and understanding his words does one become a Shrotriya or knowledgeable. We have seen this particular way of learning. It is called Shabda Pramana. How to understand this is only by a qualified teacher who himself is a Shrotriya and a Brahmanishta who can unfold the words very carefully. By tapas vindate mahat, Yudhisthira meant the following. Mahat is Brahma, and immersion in the study of Vedas is tapas. By these two answers, we are to understand the study of the Vedas, understanding the Vedas as the teacher unfolds the verse, and then a deep study and contemplation on what the teacher taught, or avenues for understanding Brahman or awareness. For Dhruti, Gita says in chapter 18, the unswerving firmness by which, through yoga, the functions of the mind, the prana, and senses are regulated, that firmness, O Partha, is sattvika. This is the way for Atma Nididhyasana. By this Atma Nididhyasana, the Jivatman will realize the Paramatman. Tattvam Asi is dawn. This is how one assumes a second form. But one assumes a second form is meant when the Jivatma recognizes that it is nothing but the Paramatma. So Arjuna's, Yaksha's question addresses the important issue of who is considered to live a life. No, excuse me. The question, Kenacha Buddhiman, Yudhisthira says, by serving the elders, Buddhiman Bhavati Vriddha Sevaya. Clearly, he means by Vriddha, Jnana Vriddha, not merely chronological age. And by maturity of knowledge is what Buddhiman is. Serving such a teacher is cited in the Gita, Tadvidya Pranipatena Pariprakshena Sevaya. Krishna told Arjuna, approach the teacher with humility, having Samit Pani in your hand, listen to him very carefully, and you are allowed to question. Praniprashnena, question again and again until you are completely satisfied with until you understand the answer. So you have to question the teacher, you have to serve the teacher to gain this knowledge. Adi Shankara says in Viveka Chudamani, Durlabham Trayatrevam Etat Daivanugraha Hetukam Manushyatvam Mumukshutvam Mahapurusha Samshrayaha. We have heard this many, many times given by both Dr. Sane and Professor Rambachan. Human birth, a burning desire for liberation, the capacity to surrender to a man of wisdom. These three things are rare indeed, and they are due to the Lord's own grace. So it's by Lord's grace that we learn to surrender our ego at the feet of a learned guru and then understand gain the knowledge of Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi. So by these two verses, Yudhisthira has essentially answered the important question of how to go about gaining this Atma Jnana and what are the prerequisites for a student to pursue this Atma Jnana and what is the end result of this pursuit, that is the recognition that Jivatman and Paramatman are the same. So the first two verses essentially answer the question of the self, or the Jivatma and the Paramatma. And the third question talks about the attributes of a Brahmin. What bestows divinity on a Brahmin? What is the appropriate conduct for good people? What causes one to realize that he is human? What actions of him are considered unrighteous? The Dharma comes in here again. Dharmaraja says, study of the Vedas bestows divinity on a Brahmin. Doing the right actions is the appropriate conduct. The specter of death makes him realize that he is human. Actions that cause sorrow to others are the most unrighteous for him. So doing the right action is the appropriate conduct, he says. Achara prathamo dharma. Dharmasya prabhu, in Vishnu Sahasranama it says, Achara prathamo dharma, dharmasya prabhu achyutaha. And what is right action? Well, we go back to Bhagavad Gita. Dr. Sane once explained, in summary, the Bhagavad Gita starts with Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Dharma, ends with Mama Dharma, Dharma. So Dharma Kshetre and Nitir Mama. Mama is the last word of the last stanza in Bhagavad Gita. Dharma is the first word of the first stanza of the Bhagavad Gita. He put them together and called it Mama Dharma. So he suggested the left-hand side in the bookshelf is Mama, and the right-hand side is Dharma. In between are the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, and that is Mama Dharma or Jivan Dharma Shastra. So that's how he'd explain Bhagavad Gita. So appropriate conduct is there, Mama Dharma. It's in those 18 chapters. Another way to look at that, what dharma, right action, is the appropriate conduct, is to look at we are all in different kshetras, different fields of activity. In whatever field of activity that we are in, there are certain rules and regulations, ethical principles, moral principles that we are supposed to follow. And that is the dharma of that field. So doing the right action is the appropriate conduct means that if you are in a certain field, do the actions that are appropriate to that particular field. If you're a medical professional, you follow I think they call it the Hippocratic oath, Hippocrate oath. You take that oath and you follow that. That's the dharma of that particular field. If you're in the teaching profession, it's a dharma for the teachers. If you're in the banking profession, it's a dharma for banking. And strangely enough, if you're a thief, there is dharma for thieves also. So you can follow that also if you want to. So what Dharmaraja is saying here is, merely being born into a Brahmin family does not make one a Brahmin. The important thing is he must be a serious student of the Vedas. A Brahmin given to the study of Vedas has mastery over his senses and mind, is always engaged in good and meritorious actions. Mere study of the Vedas without proper conduct does not befit a true Brahmin. Achara hinam na punanti vedaha. Achara hinam na punanti vedaha. Mere reading of the Vedas does not purify such a Brahmin who does not have good conduct. The humans are mortal, and so is a Brahmin. An ordinary person who thinks of this body always is worried about aging, disease, decay, and death. He does not see the eternal Atman. Without such knowledge, he undergoes repeated cycles of birth and death. A realized Brahmin knows that the eternal Atman is different from the temporary body, and in this sense, he has conquered death. The entire universe is subordinate to the Vedas. Chanting the appropriate mantra to a particular devata will bring that particular devata's grace. Brahmins have authority over all such mantras. Therefore, Brahmins are my devatas, is what Sri Krishna says in Mahabharata. Engaging in slander and inflicting pain on others are unworthy of a Brahmin's conduct. So, to Yaksha's question, what actions of him are considered unrighteous, that is, to engage in calumny, to engage in slander, to cause hurt, to cause others, to cause pain that is not conducive of a Brahmin's behavior. And what causes him to realize he is human? He realizes he is human because he undergoes disease, birth, death, birth, growth, disease, decay, and death. So that's why he recognizes he is human. What is the appropriate conduct for good people as given by the dharma of the particular kshetra they are in? Then he talks about kshatriya. What bestows divinity on a kshatriya? What is his proper conduct? What makes him human? What qualities in him are equivalent to those possessed by unrighteous people? Very interesting question. What bestows divinity on Kshatriya? Dharmaraja says, proper education and training in the use of organs make Kshatriya divine. Fire rituals and charity are his right conduct. Though a Kshatriya is brave, the fear lurking in him makes him human. If he rejects those seeking help, he is acting against Kshatriya Dharma. So Kshatriya Dharma is to relieve the distress of others, and then only is called a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya means one who relieves the difficulties of others. So proper education and training in the organs makes Kshatriya divine. So that's Kshatriya Dharma. And then his conduct is he's always engaged in rituals and engaged in charity. And Kshatriyas are very brave. You all say he is fearless. But sometimes a fear is lurking inside of him. And that's what makes him human. Otherwise, he would not be human. And he is always helping other people. He does not reject the help that other people are seeking. Perhaps what I should do is stop here and then continue on through the next one. We are almost there. Yeah, why don't I stop here?